My parents, both of them, they were very smart. They said, look, everything that you'll see happening around us and to us, it has to do with your father's career, with his work.
Gary Cooper's role in High Noon came at a crucial moment. His career was declining, his health was failing, and at 50, he worried he was too old for the part. When the original opening and closing scenes were cut during editing, it changed the entire focus of the film. The story of how Cooper's persistence through pain and doubt created a masterpiece that even his critic John Wayne couldn't ignore. Gary Cooper, originally named Frank James Cooper, was born on May 7, 1901, in Helena, Montana. His birth was dramatic. It happened during a freak spring blizzard that dumped 18 inches of snow on the city. The roads were blocked, so his father had to deliver him at home with the help of a neighbor. This unusual start seemed to hint at the incredible life he would go on to live. His parents, Charles and Alice Cooper, were from England. They raised him with both the ruggedness of American life and the refinement of British culture. At the age of 6, Gary and his older brother, Arthur, were sent to England to live with their mother's relatives. They attended Dunstable Grammar School from 1907 to 1912. These years in England shaped his personality, giving him a mix of toughness and elegance, which would later become part of his charm on screen. When Gary returned to Montana in 1912, it was a shock. He had gotten used to England's refined lifestyle, but now he was back in the rough, wild West. This mix of experiences helped him later play characters that felt real and relatable to audiences everywhere. When he was 15, he was in a car accident that left him with a limp and slightly bow-legged legs. To recover, he spent hours riding horses. He didn't know it then, but this prepared him perfectly for his future as a star in Western movies. Gary didn't plan to become an actor. In 1924, he moved to Los Angeles to try selling his cartoons to newspapers. But that didn't work out. Then he met 2 former rodeo riders, Jim Gavin and Jay Wilsey, who told him about jobs in the movie industry. He started as a stuntman and film extra, earning $5 a day or $10 for doing dangerous stunts. He appeared in small Western films where he had to do tough jobs like falling off galloping horses. One time, he refused to redo a risky fall, saying, "One fall a day is enough." Even back then, his quiet humor and laid-back attitude stood out. During this time, Gary acted in over a dozen films but didn't get much recognition. He worked so hard that sometimes he appeared in 3 films in one day. His agent suggested he change his name to something unique. That's how he picked Gary, inspired by a town in Indiana. His first small speaking role came in The Eagle, 1925, where the director, Clarence Brown, noticed Gary's natural charisma and gave him a chance. This tiny role helped him move from being just an extra to being a real actor. In 1926, Gary got his big break with the silent film The Winning of Barbara Worth. The filmmakers needed someone to play a cowboy after another actor dropped out. Gary's rugged look and real-life horse-riding skills impressed them, and he got the role. The film was shot in Nevada's Black Rock Desert, where the heat often hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. In one intense moment, Gary saved his co-star, Vilma Banky, from a runaway horse, which made him look like a real hero. When the movie premiered, audiences loved him. Critics praised his natural acting style, and Paramount Pictures quickly signed him to a contract, doubling his salary. In 1929, Gary starred in The Virginian, his first major sound film. Many actors struggled with the transition to talkies, but Gary's deep, calm voice was perfect. He worked hard with a voice coach to prepare, and his quiet, confident style became his trademark. The movie was shot in Wyoming, where one scene required him to cross a dangerous river. The current was so strong that it swept him and his horse downstream, but he made it out safely. When the Virginian premiered, it was a huge success. Critics called Gary a rising star, and the film made $1.5 million, which was massive at the time. This role made him one of Hollywood's top actors and set the standard for Western heroes: strong, silent, and moral. It also paved the way for many more iconic roles in his career. Gary's next big break came with his role in A Farewell to Arms, 1932. He played Lieutenant Frederick Henry, an ambulance driver in World War I. The story was based on Ernest Hemingway's novel and became a big hit, making over $3.5 million back then. But the movie caused some trouble, too. The Catholic Church didn't like it because it showed an affair and had strong anti-war ideas. Hemingway, at first, wasn't happy with Cooper's acting, but later they became great friends. In fact, Hemingway insisted Cooper star in the movie version of his book For Whom the Bell Tolls years later. The film got 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, and won awards for Best Cinematography and Best Sound Recording. Next, in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, Cooper played Longfellow Deeds, a small-town guy who suddenly inherits a fortune and decides to use it to help people. Frank Capra directed the movie, and it became another big success, making over $2 million at the time. Cooper's acting felt so real that it earned him his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor. The movie also won Frank Capra the Oscar for Best Director and was nominated for 4 other awards, including Best Picture. Audiences loved Cooper's character so much that a radio show and a TV series were later created based on him. The success of Mr. Deeds cemented Cooper's reputation as the honest, heroic American, a role that defined much of his career. Cooper's love life, especially his affair with Lupe Velez, was just as dramatic as his career. The two met in 1929 while filming The Wolf Song and fell into a wild romance. Velez was known as the Mexican Spitfire because of her fiery personality. Their relationship was full of public fights and big scenes. At one party, she even chased Cooper with a knife, forcing him to hide in a bathroom. The stress of their relationship took a toll on him. He lost weight and suffered from exhaustion. Cooper's mother got involved and publicly called Velez vulgar. This started a public feud between Velez and Cooper's family. Things reached a boiling point in 1931 when Cooper decided to leave for Europe to escape the relationship. Velez showed up at the train station with a gun and fired at him. Luckily, she missed, but the scandal made national headlines. Although the affair hurt his reputation at first, it also made him more famous, especially with women who found his bad boy image appealing. After the breakup, Cooper focused on repairing his image, taking serious roles, and being more private about his personal life. In 1933, Cooper married Veronica Balfe, a New York socialite nicknamed Rocky. Their wedding was small and quiet, held at her mother's apartment in New York City. This surprised many since Cooper was known as a ladies' man. But friends said Rocky's intelligence and love for outdoor activities like skiing and horseback riding won him over. Their marriage brought stability to Cooper's life after the chaos with Velez. In 1937, they had a daughter, Maria Veronica. Becoming a father changed Cooper. He adored his daughter, often bringing her to movie sets and even turning down roles to spend more time with his family. In 1941, Cooper's role as Alvin C. York in Sergeant York changed his life. At first, Cooper didn't want the role. He wasn't sure about playing a real-life hero, but when he met the actual Alvin York in Tennessee, things changed. York, who was quiet and humble like Cooper, encouraged him to take the role. That meeting gave Cooper the confidence to put everything into the character. He practiced York's accent, studied how he moved, and even learned to shoot guns like York. The effort paid off. The film became the highest-grossing movie of 1941, earning $6 million. Critics loved Cooper's performance, calling it heartfelt and powerful. At the Oscars in February 1942, Cooper won his first Academy Award. In his speech, he said it wasn't him who deserved the award. It was Alvin York. Cooper also received a special medal from veterans for inspiring patriotism. During the 1940s, Cooper's films showed an interesting mix of themes. He was personally conservative and supported Republican ideas, but he acted in movies with strong anti-fascist messages. One of these was For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1943. In the film, Cooper played Robert Jordan, an American fighting in the Spanish Civil War. The story, based on Ernest Hemingway's novel, had a clear political message, even though the filmmakers toned it down. At the same time, rumors caused problems for Cooper. The FBI investigated him after someone falsely claimed he spoke at a communist rally. This rumor wasn't true. It came from propaganda tied to his role in For Whom the Bell Tolls. Later, in 1947, Cooper testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He told them he had turned down movie scripts that seemed to promote communist ideas. Cooper's choices showed how he managed to stay true to his beliefs while navigating the tricky politics of the time. By the late 1940s, Cooper faced serious health problems. His stomach ulcers became worse, and he needed surgeries. He also developed hernias and, by 1949, suffered from anemia and jaundice. These issues made it hard for him to work, and he had to take long breaks. His once strong and energetic image began to fade. During this time, his films didn't do well either. Movies like Saratoga Trunk and Unconquered failed to impress audiences. Critics said his performances lacked the spark he was known for. Cooper's personal life was also in trouble. In 1948, during the filming of The Fountainhead, he started an affair with Patricia Neal, who was much younger than him. Their relationship lasted 3 years and became very intense. In 1950, Neal became pregnant with Cooper's child. For a moment, Cooper thought about leaving his wife, Veronica "Rocky" Balfe, to marry Neal. But the fear of a public scandal changed his mind. Neal had an abortion, a decision that haunted her for the rest of her life. The affair hurt Cooper too. He became guilt-ridden and looked worn out. Neal ended the relationship in 1951 after a harsh conversation with Cooper's mother, who blamed her for his health problems. Cooper stayed with his wife, but their marriage was never the same. Despite all these struggles, The Fountainhead in 1949 was a bright spot for Cooper. The movie, based on Ayn Rand's novel, was very different from his usual roles. He played Howard Rourke, an architect with strong, unshakable ideals. Cooper's wife encouraged him to take the part, seeing it as a chance to refresh his career. On set, Cooper and Neal had intense chemistry, which added to the film's drama. Critics were mixed about the movie, calling it too preachy, but it earned $2.1 million at the box office and brought Cooper back into the spotlight. It also showed a new side of his acting, proving he could handle complex and emotional roles. Gary Cooper was 50 years old when he was offered the role of Will Kane in High Noon. At the time, his career was not going well. He had already turned down the role 3 times because he wasn't sure it was right for him. One reason was the large age gap between him and Grace Kelly, who played his wife in the movie. She was just 21, almost 30 years younger, and Cooper worried that audiences wouldn't believe they were a real couple. He was also dealing with serious health problems like a painful ulcer and back issues, which made him nervous about taking on such a big role. But money and the chance to save his career changed his mind. He wasn't as popular at the box office anymore, and Paramount didn't consider him a top star anymore. The $100,000 salary for High Noon was much less than what he used to earn, but it included a share of the profits. This turned out to be a smart move, and the producer, Stanley Kramer, convinced him that the role could help him make a big comeback. Cooper worked closely with Grace Kelly during filming. She was a new actress, and High Noon was her first major role. At first, she felt intimidated working with such a big star, but Cooper was kind and tried to help her feel comfortable. One moment during filming showed how professional he was. There was a wedding scene where Cooper had to lift Kelly onto a bureau for a kiss. Even though he was in terrible pain from his back injury, he finished the scene without complaining. Kelly said this was when she realized how great of an actor he was. Some people believed they might have had a short romance during filming, but this was never confirmed. Still, their chemistry on screen made people wonder. However, there was some tension on set because Cooper's wife, Veronica Balfe, visited several times. During one of her visits, she walked in on an intimate scene between Cooper and Kelly, which caused an awkward moment. Despite this, both actors stayed professional, and Kelly later said Cooper taught her a lot about acting, especially how to be subtle and natural. Then there were some scenes that didn't end up in the final cut. Originally, High Noon was supposed to start and end with haunting scenes of the town of Hadleyville as a ghost town. The opening would have shown empty streets, broken-down buildings, and tumbleweeds rolling through. Then, as the story began, it would transform into the busy, lively town where the action happens. This was supposed to make people feel that the town's future was doomed because of the events of the movie. At the end, the scene would go back to the ghost town, showing how the town had fallen apart because of its people's cowardice. But this idea was cut during editing. The effects needed to show the transformation were hard to pull off at the time, and the filmmakers worried it might slow the movie down or take attention away from the main story. Without these scenes, the movie stayed focused on Will Kane and the moral choices he faced, making it more intense and personal. There was also a subplot in the original script about a second deputy marshal named Toby. In the story, Toby was bringing a prisoner back to Hadleyville while everything else was happening in town. The audience would have seen his journey in 3 scenes: traveling with the prisoner, dealing with problems on the road, and finally arriving in town, possibly just after the big shootout. These scenes were actually filmed in early 1952, but they were removed during editing. The filmmakers decided the subplot would distract from the main story and the build-up to Noon. Interestingly, one small hint about Toby's character is still in the movie. In the saloon scene, someone says, "You ain't got 2 deputies." Harv Pell here says he just quit. That line originally referred to both Harvey Pell and Toby, but since Toby's story was cut, it now feels like a leftover detail. Cutting Toby's storyline kept the focus on Will Kane's lonely battle, making his struggle feel even more powerful. High Noon came out on July 24, 1952, and it was very different from other westerns. Most westerns focused on gunfights and action, but this movie was about tough choices and inner struggles. The story was told in real time, which made it unique. At first, some people didn't understand this new style, but soon critics and audiences loved it. A critic from the New York Times said it was a western to end all westerns. Another reviewer called it one of the greatest westerns ever made. The movie also made a lot of money. It earned $3.75 million in North America, which is like $38 million today, and $18 million worldwide. That was incredible for a movie that only cost $730,000 to make, especially during a time when more people were staying home to watch TV instead of going to theaters. Not everyone admired High Noon, though. John Wayne, the biggest Western star, hated the movie. He called it the most un-American thing I've ever seen. He thought the main character, Marshal Will Kane, was weak because Kane asked the townspeople for help instead of standing up alone. Wayne believed a Western hero should always rely on himself, no one else. Director Howard Hawks felt the same way. He even said, "I made Rio Bravo because I didn't like High Noon." Hawks and Wayne made Rio Bravo in 1959 to show how they thought a real Western should look. Their dislike wasn't just about the story, it was also political. Wayne and Hawks thought High Noon was criticizing the Hollywood blacklist. The blacklist happened when people in Hollywood were accused of supporting communism and were banned from working. They believed Will Kane stood for people who fought against the blacklist, and Wayne, who supported the blacklist, saw this as an attack on his views. Despite all this, something surprising happened. When Gary Cooper won the Oscar for Best Actor in High Noon, Cooper asked Wayne to accept the award for him because he couldn't attend the ceremony. Wayne gave a speech praising Cooper's performance, even though he hated the movie. It showed how complicated Hollywood relationships were back then. Gary Cooper's performance as Marshal Will Kane was one of the best of his career. He was 51 years old, and many thought his career was slowing down. Winning the Oscar proved he still had what it took to be a leading man. Gary Cooper's later years were full of achievements and struggles, both in his career and personal life. In 1954, he starred in Vera Cruz with Burt Lancaster. The movie made over $9 million, but filming wasn't easy for Cooper. While shooting in Mexico, he hurt his shoulder when an oil well exploded. Later, he fell off a horse and hurt his hip. On top of that, Lancaster's rifle accidentally burned him when fired too close. Despite these challenges, audiences enjoyed his role, though Cooper himself thought he didn't do a good job. In 1956, he took a role in Friendly Persuasion, even though he wasn't excited about it at first. He didn't want to play a peaceful Quaker farmer during the Civil War and said, "I ain't ever played a pappy yet, and I ain't aiming to start now." But director William Wyler convinced him. The film turned out to be one of Cooper's best. It told the story of Jess Birdwell, a man torn between his beliefs and the war happening around him. The movie touched on family, faith, and moral struggles, and audiences loved it. It even got 6 Oscar nominations. To prepare, Cooper visited a Quaker meeting, guided by the author of the book the movie was based on. She told him to show strength by holding back instead of taking action. Cooper's personal life changed a lot in the late 1950s. In 1958, while promoting a movie in Europe, he traveled with his estranged wife Rocky and their daughter Maria. They visited the Vatican and met Pope Pius XII. This deeply affected Cooper, who had been feeling empty despite his success. After that trip, he worked on fixing his relationship with Rocky and started going to church more often. He spent time with Father Harold Ford, a local priest, and the two became close. They talked about faith during scuba diving trips and shared a love for firearms. Cooper eventually decided to join the Catholic Church. On April 9, 1959, after months of reflection, he officially became a Catholic. He later said he wasn't trying to be perfect, but just wanted to be better. In 1958, Cooper starred as Santiago, a Cuban fisherman, in The Old Man and the Sea, based on Ernest Hemingway's famous novel. This role earned him his 5th and final Oscar nomination. Filming wasn't easy. and Hemingway wasn't happy with some of the production choices. The crew used a rubber marlin and old footage of fish, which Hemingway didn't like. He also said Cooper looked too much like a rich actor to play a simple fisherman. Still, audiences loved Cooper's performance, and the film was nominated for several Oscars, winning one for its music. Cooper's health started to decline in 1960. In April, he had surgery for prostate cancer, which had spread to his colon. Just weeks later, he needed another operation to remove a tumor from his intestine. Even though he was sick, Cooper finished one last movie, The Naked Edge. It came out in May 1961, the same month he passed away. One of the most touching moments of Cooper's final year happened at the 1961 Oscars. He was too sick to attend, so his friend James Stewart accepted an honorary Oscar on his behalf. Stewart's emotional speech brought many people to tears. Shortly after, the public learned about Cooper's terminal illness. People from around the world sent messages of support, including Pope John XXIII, Queen Elizabeth II, and President John F. Kennedy. Cooper faced his illness bravely, saying he trusted God's will and wasn't afraid. Cooper's last public appearance was on March 13, 1961, at a boxing match in Miami. He looked very frail but still carried himself with dignity. On May 13, 1961, Gary Cooper passed away at home, surrounded by his family, a priest, and his doctor. He was 60 years old, leaving behind a legacy as one of Hollywood's most respected and beloved stars. In 1999, Cooper's daughter, Maria Cooper Janis, shared more about her father in her book, Gary Cooper Off Camera: A Daughter Remembers. She explained that her father had dyslexia, which made it hard for him to read scripts quickly. This was not well understood at the time, but it explained why he often picked roles with fewer lines. It also showed how hard he worked to succeed despite this challenge. In 2001, letters between Cooper and writer Ernest Hemingway were made public. They had been friends for years, and their letters showed how close they were. The letters also revealed Cooper's feelings about Hollywood. In one letter from 1960, he told Hemingway he was worried about being left behind in the changing movie industry. He wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if there's still a place for an old cowhand like me." Another surprising story came out in 2005. A film historian, David Thompson, suggested that Cooper might have had a brief same-sex relationship with actor Anderson Lawler in the 1930s. This story is still debated and unproven, but it started new conversations about identity in early Hollywood. In 2013, a documentary called Cooper and Hemingway, The True Jen shared more about Cooper's political views. People thought he was very conservative, but the film showed that his views were more complicated. Cooper didn't like the anti-communist panic of the 1950s and felt uncomfortable with it. Outside of acting, Cooper had many hobbies and passions. He grew up in Montana and loved the outdoors. He spent a lot of time hunting and fishing. In 1931, he went on a big safari in Africa, where he hunted lions, rhinos, and more. He was also a great horseman, which helped him in Western movies, but was also something he just enjoyed. Cooper loved skiing too, and often skied in Sun Valley, Idaho, even as he got older. Cooper also had artistic talents. He studied drawing and painting in college, and even published cartoons in a local newspaper. He admired Western art and collected works by Frederick Remington and C.M. Russell. In the 1950s, he became interested in scuba diving and even did underwater scenes in a movie. He liked driving fast cars, which sometimes got him into trouble, and later he enjoyed photography. He would often take pictures while traveling or on movie sets. As an actor, Cooper's style was different from others at the time. While many actors used big gestures and dramatic voices, Cooper acted in a calm, natural way. He could show deep emotions with just a look or a small movement. This was especially clear in High Noon, where his character's struggles were shown more through his expressions than his words. Many actors looked up to Cooper. Marlon Brando called him the original and said others tried to copy him. Actors like Montgomery Clift, James Dean, and Clint Eastwood admired his work. Eastwood said Cooper created the perfect Western hero, strong, quiet, and moral. Even modern actors like Tom Hanks and George Clooney have said they were inspired by Cooper's acting.